I'm sorry this recap of Echo Fort is so late. I had it filmed over a week ago, and then as I was editing it, the audio kept cutting out in certain spots, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it, so I had a mini crash out, and then I just did not have time to film it again until now. This is like my busiest time at work right now, so I just didn't have time. Sorry. Anyway. Echo Fort starts with Vesper making it back to Stormfell and telling Draegor that Cade was actually from Avanis and had been there to kill him. Draegor tells Vesper that everyone is to believe that she died in the attack on Neverkeep, since they already do anyway, and he forces her to swear a magical oath that she will secretly hunt Bastion and bring the dragon to him in Fae form at Wrathbane. The Cardinal Reaper arrives and is revealed to be Solomon Imai, a Fae who possesses all 4 elements. Everest sees Kaiser slip into Reaper's secret passage and follows, where she sees him free the vampire Lazarus Astrafel, whom the Reapers captured and intended to execute. Vesper goes to her sage Moya in the Cavern of the Lost Souls, and Moya tells her that the dark whispers her name and that when the darkness calls Vesper's name again, she should listen. The Nightfire summons Everest to Kaiser, where his fury feasts on her fears to recharge his power. However, her void kicks in, and she manages to redirect Kaiser's possession back onto him, which starts to show her his darkest nightmares and fears. Kaiser eventually gets a mental barrier up to close off the possession, but something about Everest's power allows him to actually feel rather than be hollow and vacant like he always is. Harlan swore allegiance to the Cardinal Reaper and fully believes in his goodness. Harlan says the dark monster in the Reaper's chamber needs to be kept fed, that the Reapers believe it judges those it's offered and selects its prey while letting the worthy live. Everest meets with Mavis, where she sees maps on his desk, which makes it seem like he's searching for something, and he says that it's something he lost a long time ago that he plans to return to his care. She tries to give him that month's weapons, but it seems that Ransom stole them all. However, instead of the weapons, he says he'll accept a traitor's skull, which the Sky Witch brought to Neverkeep, as it can be used for dark magic. Vesper trails the dragon through a tear in the magical barrier between kingdoms, where they have to fight off the magically altered monster creatures that reside there, and they end up in Pyros, the Fire Kingdom. She sees that the dragon still has 2 of the 4 green gemstones embedded in its neck that keep him from shifting. Vesper manages to dig out the spikes, and Bastion is able to switch back to Fae. Vesper then notices that in Fae form he doesn't seem to have aged appropriately, despite the cavern he was kept in indicating that he had been held prisoner there for a very long time. The 2 fight, and Vesper is able to steal some blood from his open wounds and use ether to control him. She then places a curse on him so that he must keep her alive until she can get him onto Stormfell soil. Everest manages to use her power to break Vesper's wards around her room so she can find the traitor's skull, and while there she finds a book marked on a page about an Aquina leopard order form. I'll put a screenshot here of the info about that order form. It happens to be Everest's order form. North and Kaiser catch her in Vesper's chambers, and while they're there, they have to hide because Draegor arrives to go through and collect some of Vesper's things. They follow Draegor down to the secret passages and see that the archway portals have been destroyed and that the stardust is gone. We meet Septa, a stonebreaker who has been betrothed to Cade the whole time he was infiltrating the Air Kingdom. It turns out Cade's real name is Lester Charbone, and Earl Tarloid is not happy he's returned while Draegor and his family are still alive. Lester tries to tell the Earl what he's learned, but Vesper's curse prevents him from speaking on it and causes his body to be covered in welts and boils. Vesper snuck into a Pyros outpost for food and clothes for her and Bastion and end up having to kill a bunch of people because she got caught. And then they make a deal saying that they'll work together to get out of Pyros, but Bastion won't try to escape or screw Vesper over until they re-enter Stormfell so that her curse upon him is broken, and in return, her death is Bastion's to claim. Kaiser goes to fill his power reserves by feeding on Everest's fears when it flips on him again, showing Everest his fears and memories. She sees memory of a 6-year-old Kaiser, his mother, father, and little brother Cato. Their town was being invaded by Cascadian people, and their parents fought to protect but were killed, and so was his brother. Kaiser was attacked but not killed, and the memory ends before Everest and Kaiser can see the face of the man who killed his family. Kaiser requires Everest to use her power on him whenever he requests it so that he can remain in the carnage of his own mind without her. He says one day he was in agony over the loss of his family, and the next he felt nothing, and has felt nothing since until Everest's void powers target him. Everest learns that Kaiser can track Calciphine, his Sayer dragon's whereabouts, and see through his eyes at any time, so basically he's been spying on her through his dragon the whole time. Kaiser and Everest go into the Reaper tunnels. I'll put a screenshot here, but they come across a creature in the dark that says it is chaos, the undoing of the sky, the unraveling of it all. The creature says the Reapers want to command it, but it may only be commanded by the hallowed sovereign. It tells them that they will soon step between the boundaries of this place and that, and soon they shall pray to it instead of the callous stars. Septa and Alestro, aka Cade, go through with their wedding. However, they can't consummate because of Vesper's curse. Vesper keeps thinking someone is calling to her, but there's no one there. Bastion estimates that he was held captive for 250 to 300 years. Bastion says the green crystals used to force him into his dragon form also had a power that held him in a stasis. Essentially, he didn't age and remained as he was the day they embedded the crystals into his skin. Vesper and Bastion pretend to be prostitutes to get around another town, which leads them to a Master Zyad, and agreeing to be his entertainment for the night in exchange for a room, food, and a hot bath, and 2,000 karmas. Bastion needs something of high value or rarity to recharge his magic, and since they have no gold, Vesper allows him to hold the vial of Moraine and Dahlia's blood she wears around her neck. Master Zyad appears, and Vesper recognizes that he's a siren. She and Bastion start to put on a show for Zyad per his request, and she uses her gifts to push images and desires back on Zyad to keep him occupied, while she and Bastion sneak through a secret door in a bookcase that she noticed, so that way they can find his precious mines and Comet, which allegedly all who claim a piece of the Comet are blessed with the gift of being able to ask a single question of the stars themselves. It's now time for Everest and the other neophytes to go through with their graduation day evaluations and final trial. The graduation trial is done in pairs to provide unity with their fellow ring carvers in intense situations. Of course, the stars chose Everest to be paired up with Ransom. There's a series of riddles and tasks, and they successfully complete the trial. Everest tries to leave Neverkeep without Kaiser knowing and taking her with him to the matriarch now that they've graduated, but he catches her thanks to Calcifiend. Harlan helps her escape Kaiser, and Everest makes it to Wandershire and Mavis, who agreed to help her get away from Neverkeep. Vesper hears her name being called again, this time more urgent. She uses ether and senses a river of power even deeper in the mines, and it calls to her, wanting her to come to it. She realizes this is what Moya was referring to when she said that the dark whispers her name and that when the darkness calls Vesper's name again, she should listen. They find a smooth stone monolith in a triangular shape with 3 faces, each carved with one of the fire zodiac signs, along with a layout of their corresponding constellations above them. In the center, piercing the eye of the lion for Leo, was a huge iron spike that cracked the monolith. When Vesper touches it, a bunch of voices, shrieking in agony, ring in her skull, and she's thrown back from the sheer force of that pain. Vesper then thinks of the thing of darkness beneath Neverkeep that devours the guilty and realizes that the iron spike is the leash and says that the river of light is spearing straight for the stone and is between this place and next. Vesper thinks the thing is made up of raw ether that should be roaming wild through every living thing in the land, but is instead trapped in the monolith because of the iron spike. Go to chapter 29 to read everything Vesper says about ether and how it's supposed to flow, inhibited across the waning lands, but instead is being funneled somewhere else by the iron spike. Vesper manages to get the iron spike out of the stone monolith, and the raw ether is able to flow freely again. Bastion uses his stone magic to sense the comet, and they claim 2 pieces before hearing Zayad shouting at everyone to find them. As they fight their way out of that house of sin, Vesper is recognized, and the matriarch's personal guard sees that the Sky Witch isn't actually dead. Vesper accepts that she's going to be captured and taken to the matriarch so that it's a spectacle, and reminds Bastion that he's bound to help her escape Pyros before she uses her magic to fling him into the river so that he's free to rescue her from the matriarch. Mavis tells Everest that the Reapers are pawns, a way to keep the endless war fueled, because taking all the multi-elementals and seers away from the pool of warriors ensures that none of the 4 lands have an advantage, only the Reapers do. On the way to take Everest to Cascada, Mavis stops him in Pyros, where he wants to loot the dead on a battlefield and take anything of value. Everest's magic latches onto a potent dark power deep within the earth, and she feels tethered to it by the void. However, amongst that dark power, she feels a river of silver glimmering like starlight, similar to that Vesper and Bastion saw deep in the mine. To break her from her trance, Mavis gave her a small dose of battle stims, an illegal substance, and while under the influence, Everest tells Mavis that she's the void from the prophecy. Kaiser and North catch up to them thanks to Calcifiend hiding in Everest's bag, and they capture her. Kaiser delivers Everest to the matriarch, and he is going to try and learn how to wield the magic of the void using his possession. Ransom is assigned to his father's battalion, who tells him that he's learned the Flamebringers found the void from the prophecy and that they're going to have to make great sacrifices so they can claim it. Commander Rake and Prince Dragor make a secret truce, saying that for one battle they will not harm each other's people so they can unite to attack Pyros and kill the matriarch, because Mavis sold out Everest's identity as the Void for 20,000 karmas from Commander Rake. Everest tries to secretly escape and sees the vampire Lazarus Ashafel that Kaiser had freed from the Reapers. He's apparently taken over his coven, and the matriarch is trying to agree to terms for a treaty with him. Kaiser feeds on Everest's fears, and in one of her memories he sees her father's face and demands to know who he is. Turns out that while Kaiser killed Everest's mother, her father, Commander Rake, is who killed Kaiser's entire family. Kaiser says that a Fury's banes take the form of their deepest torment, so his take the form of the dogs that Rake cast from ice and commanded to tear apart his family. So she can't try to escape again. Everest is thrown into the cell that Vesper is in. They make a temporary truce so that they can try to escape and take out Kaiser, North, and the matriarch, but this time it's based on trust, not blood magic like before. Solomon, the Cardinal Reaper, tells Harlan that the Seers have seen a terrible battle in Pyros and learned of the Void. He tasks Harlan with finding a way to free Everest from the Flamebringers and bring her to him. Bastion is trying to figure out how to break into the castle to free Vesper when he sees a pale blue Sayer dragon. He interacts with it before it flies back into the palace. Bastion decides to be ballsy and sees the Sayer dragon as a sign to follow him into the palace. There he's mistaken for a fire warrior and asked to fight in a spectacle for the matriarch. He decides this is his chance to figure out where Vesper is and get to her since it gives him access to the palace. While watching the fights, the matriarch starts to pull Kaiser aside, stating that Everest is the key to all of this and that she needs to tell him something she should have sooner. She says it's about his emotions, why he cannot, when she gets cut off because one of her guards barges in to say Cascada and Stormfell have colluded and are an hour away from the palace gates. Kaiser retrieves Everest from the dungeon and takes her out to the battle so he can try to wield her void power on the Ring Carvers and Skyforgers. Bastion finds Vesper and she power shares with him, something that requires trust, so that they don't die as the building starts to collapse around them, and they share a passionate kiss as they free Vesper from her cage finally. Earl Tarlord of the Earth Kingdom and his warriors use a contraption of metal and magic that transports him and his army through tunnels the kingdom secretly carved out far beneath the mountains that will take them into Pyros to attack, trapping the Flamebringers between all 3 other kingdoms' armies. Vesper doesn't know who her parents were, so she just claims they're dead. I feel like her parentage could be important eventually, but Vesper and Bastion see Everest being yanked around the battlefield by Kaiser, and Vesper tells him that she intends to keep her promise to Everest that she would kill Kaiser. Kaiser uses the void power to stop Vesper's attempt to magically restrain and kill him, but she manages to scrape his leg, drawing blood, so she can try and use blood magic on him. There's an explosion that throws Kaiser away from Everest, Vesper, and Bastion, which also breaks his possession of Everest when he hits his head. Everest and Vesper weigh what to do, feeling that strange bond shared between them. They say they could go after the truth, try to hunt down the Keystones, and figure out what's happening to the ley lines in hopes of stopping the monster beneath Neverkeep, which would be betraying their homelands. Vesper seems disappointed that Everest chooses to go their separate ways, continuing on the paths they had already chosen. Vesper tells Bastion that her curse binds him until he sets foot on the land of Stormfell, so follow her there, then run. It's all she can offer him. Bastion doesn't want to run to Stormfell, saying how he's alone here in the world. Everyone he ever knew died while he was kept as an unchanging prisoner, so the only Fae he knows now is her. Bastion wanted her to choose him and is furious to realize she won't, so he reminds her of the other promise she made him, that her death is his once she kills Cade, but he wants her to remember when he kills her that he gave her the chance to turn from that path. Harlan finds Everest on the battlefield, saying Solomon knows she's a void and sent him to bring her back to safety from the war. They fight as Everest believes Solomon just wants to use her void power for himself. Harlan tries to force Everest to go with him when Kaiser finds them. Bastion asks Vesper if she ever fully shifts, and she says no, which seems maybe significant. Vesper delivers Bastion to Dragor, who then pulls from his pocket those green crystals that had been embedded in his neck to keep him in prison for years. Bastion shifts into his dragon and begins to fight for freedom, tearing the fortress of Echo Fort apart. Skyforgers were trying to capture Everest when Commander Rake and Ransom find her. She sees Harlan and Kaiser fighting each other, and suddenly the void surges more powerful than it ever had, slamming into Kaiser and Harlan before Kaiser's possession can force Harlan to slit his own throat. Her void power surge was so strong that it ripped apart the magic holding Iron Wraith in the air, so it starts to fall to the ground. She turns the entirety of the void upon Kaiser, and with a hand to his chest, she feels the void cut through him, tearing apart any magic it finds. The Fiercesire Soul Bond fights back against the void power, but the void finally breaks that unbreakable bond. Everest then drives her dagger up under Kaiser's ribs, and he starts laughing. We then finally learn what the name he's been calling her means, Silka Levin, or Killer of Mine. With that, Kaiser then falls over the edge of the cliff. Harlan tries to get Everest to come with him, but instead she goes with her dad and Ransom, wondering if she's good enough for the commander at last. Vesper manages to save herself at the last second from being killed, hitting the ground when Iron Wraith starts to fall, and also manages to grab Dragor before he falls over the edge. Dragor thrusts something into Vesper's hand and furiously commands her to subdue the dragon as she was supposed to. Vesper finds Bastion and he pleads with her to run from here. He tells her he knows the old places where they can find new ones, that this endless war isn't all there is. While Bastion thinks about how he should have asked her to run before this, Vesper drives one of the green gemstones into his skin. The final chapter is Kaiser's, and the dagger that Everest had shoved under his ribs narrowly missed his heart, and he begins to feel his mind and soul reawakening. Everest's void magic not only tore apart the Fiercesire soul tie, but also ripped out the piece of him that had kept him muted for so many years. Calciphene finds Kaiser and he asks the Sayer dragon to seek the matriarch or North and bring them to him. Kaiser feels himself bleeding out around the dagger in his chest and looks up to see the Pisces constellation in the sky, his last thoughts being that, of course, Everest had come to watch him die in a way, but thanks to her, he was him again and could die as himself. The end.